Well, all right, guys, we're going to get started here. I have a funny story for you, or at least I don't know if you guys will think it's funny, but for me, it was funny. Anyway, so I looked up at my clock. I was sitting in my office. I looked up at my clock and I saw that it had 55 at the end. And so I realized, oh, shoot, I got class starting in 5 minutes. I jumped up. I ran in here to the training room. I got everything set up. I got logged onto Zoom. I was all ready to go. And 59 ticks turns to 00. And I'm like, man, there's not one person in the room for class. What's going on? And then I look at the clock and I realized it was 10 o'clock, not 11 o'clock. And so I was like, oh, okay, good. At least that's why there's nobody in the room. So I go back to my office. I work for a little while. I come back in here at 10:50. I get everything set up. It's now 11:03 and there's no one in the room. So I'm going to be teaching, I guess, just to you guys on Zoom. So it's just kind of funny, at least to me it was funny, is I come in here, I'm disappointed that it's nobody in here. And then I realized, oh, well, of course no one's in the room. It's 10 o'clock. And now it's 11 and there's still no one in the room. Although someone is about to walk in right now. Thank you, Luz. I was just telling all the people on Zoom, I'm in here all by myself. So, all right. Now I have Luz here. So I've got Zoom and Luz here. So that's
Yeah, how about that?
yeah, that's
I
good.
didn't know he was coming or not.
You didn't know what?
There was somebody in there, but I didn't know he was coming or not.
Oh,
I don't know.
is he like in coffee or something?
Yes, but I don't know if he was coming. I don't know.
Oh, he's not. No,
Okay.
that's Steve. All right. So anyway, thank you for being here. So for you guys that are on Zoom, if you'll throw first and last name in the chat box, just so I have a record of who was here in the class. I'm going to give this to Luz to fill out. So anyway, I don't know what the deal was. After Tuesday, after a holiday, I probably should never do a class because I don't get very many people show up. But the important people did show up, right?
That's
Do I
right. We're
need
here.
agent number?
No.
Thing?
Yeah, that's right. So thank you. Thank you for being here. So, all right. So here's what we're going to do. So today we're going to talk about lead generation. So
Okay.
as we do this and we go through and we talk about it, I've got 4 things that I'm going to cover with you today. And as we go through and do that, though, I want to start before we even get to number 1, or at least maybe I should say part of me explaining to you point number 1 is I want to give you my background of me coming into real estate and tell you a little bit about what brought me into real estate. And the reason is that I'm going to tell you the story is because it ties to what the first principle in terms of you setting more appointments, it ties back to that principle. And so I'm going to give you this background as part of that. So I was working at a bank, and I was working at First Security Bank, which then sold to Wells Fargo. And in fact, I like to say that within a year, when I left First Security Bank, I felt like, now keep in mind, I was like 25, probably when I left the bank to come into real estate. And I felt like me leaving the bank was going to put them out of business. And then a year later, they did sell to Wells Fargo. So I like to say that that's probably because I left the bank. Now, probably not true, but I was a little arrogant that way. So I came into real estate, though. And actually, let me even back up from that. So I'm working at the bank, and my wife and I decided to go out and look at houses. And we go and find an agent. I don't even know how we found this agent, but we find this agent. She then takes us and shows us a couple of HUD homes. And one of the properties that she took us to as a HUD home, the price on it was $50,000. And we were thinking at that time, like, I don't know if we can afford to pay $50,000 to buy a house, but we decided we were going to try to do that. And so we have this agent, she takes us out, we make an offer on this HUD home for $50,000 and we get outbid. And we were disappointed because it was like in the perfect area that we wanted to be in. And We just felt like it was going to be perfect. Well, we didn't get the house. So the agent says, well, I can find you some other properties. And so she starts going and finding properties for us to go look at. Well, along the way, I start running the math on how it all works in terms of her commissions. Now, so keep in mind, we were going and looking at a $50,000 house. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, $50,000 times 3%. Although truthfully, I didn't really know how it works. So I timed it by 6% because I assumed she got paid 6% on that. And I thought, well, she's going to make 6%. She's going to make $3,000 from the sale of this house. And all she had to do was go in the car and drive around. One day, hey, how do you become an agent? This seems like kind of a cool job. And so she told me about Stringham Real Estate Schools. I signed up, I went to Stringham. But before I did that, I called up, I had an uncle that was a builder. And I called up my uncle and I said, okay, I'm thinking about going into real estate. I want to get my real estate license. What do you think? And he told me that he had 4 agents that sat his model homes. He said, I paid 2 of them over 60,000. The other 2 I paid over 100,000. Now, keep in mind, again, this is back in 1993, maybe even 92 that happened, that he was telling me that. Well, I'm working at the bank making about $35,000 a year. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I could double my income if I could make 60,000 from real estate. So I go to real estate school. I get done with real estate school. I pass the test. I get my license. I go to call up my uncle and I said, okay, I'm ready to come to work. My models, and if I put a 5th one in there, that now dilutes the amount of money that they're all going to make. And so until one of them quits, I can't hire you. And I was like, oh, well, now what do I do then? Because I just assumed I was going to come in and make at least $60,000 from real estate. So he points me to a guy that he says, you should go talk to Joker. And what he said is, if you go talk to him, like his agents are pretty loyal to him. They seem to follow him wherever he goes. You should go talk to him because he'd probably be good. So I go talk to him. And when I went and talked to him, he put on a pretty good sales pitch. And he told me my commission split would be 50-50. So I called up my uncle and I said to my uncle, okay, here's what I'm being told. This is what they're offering. What do you think about that? Said, well, you have 2 options in real estate. And I now have a second person live here, just so you guys on Zoom don't feel so bad for me anymore. Not that you did, where you would have come in person. Anyway, right?
Funny.
Okay. So anyway, I call him up and he says, well, you got 2 choices in real estate. One is you go to a company that is going to give you a high split, but no training, or you go to a company that has low split, but they give you training. And I said, well, what would you recommend? And he said, well, why don't you call your cousin? So this is my uncle's son. He says, why don't you call your cousin and ask him, because he made a go at real estate and he's now an appraiser. So it didn't work, obviously, right? Oh. So I called up my cousin and I said, and in fact, my cousin worked the building that you see out the window right there, that's the closest one right there, that white one, is where my cousin worked at. And he worked for another cousin of mine as an appraiser. And I called him up and I said, hey, what do you think? And he said, yeah, what my dad told you is right. You have 2 choices. You either go to a company that gives you a high split but no training, or you go to a company that gives you a lower split, but they'll actually train you on real estate. And so I said, okay, which would you recommend? And my cousin says, I chose high split, no training. I said, okay, well, so what if you had it to do over again? He said, if I had it to do over again, I'd go get trained, because the reason I'm not a real estate agent is nobody trained me because I had the high split. So anyway, so I said, okay, fine. I went over to this company, to Coldwell Banker, and I start there at Coldwell Banker. And I went into my manager, and when I was talking, hey, Joel, he's trying to hand you that. So I went into my manager and I said to him, okay, I want to make a go at real estate. What do you think? And he said, well, are you going to do it part-time or full-time? And I said, I'm going to transition out of my job into this. And he said, then don't bother. Just don't even bother. And I was like, okay. Why do you say that? And he said, because you won't go do what's necessary. And I just said, okay. So I went home and I talked to my wife. My wife said, all right, quit your job. Let's make it go for it. She had some stock in the company she worked at. She said, we'll sell my stock. We'll have enough money to live on. So I do that. And I go and I sign up with this guy. And my first meeting with him to do a business plan, he says, well, how much do you want to make in real estate? And I said to him what almost every agent that comes into real estate says is, I wanted to make, how much would you guess? $100,000. That's right. So even 6 years later now, people still say 100,000. So anyway, so I said, I want to make $100,000 a year. Well, okay. If you want to make $100,000 a year, then you're going to have to close a certain number of transactions. Well, at the time, the average commission that we would get paid on a house was $2,000 at that time. I know. So he said to me, okay, if you want to make 100,000, then you're going to have to close. How many houses do I have to close? 50, right? So you're going to have to close 50 houses. So I said, okay, tell me what to do. And he said, okay, here's what you should do is first go make a list of everyone you know, and then come back and talk to me. So I spent a day, and I actually had only been married for a few years. So I basically went and got the list of people that we invited to our wedding. And I was like, okay, here's my list of people that I know. And he said, all right, now go mail them a card that said he had in the office these card, like a thank you card, but it basically said, I don't even remember what it said, like I'm new to the business or something. And he said, mail these out. So I did that. Then I went back and said, okay, now tell me what to do. And he said, all right, now just go knock on doors. And I was like, okay. But what he told me was this. Now, so I got to give you I'm going to give you a bonus principle that I said I was going to give you 4 things to do, basically, to help you set more appointments. I'm going to give you a bonus 5th thing, sort of. So here's the thing. One of the things that mantra in my life is that power comes out of telling the truth. Okay. And the reason I give you that principle is power comes out of telling the truth. So, and in fact, let me kind of just briefly explain that to you. Power comes out of telling the truth. Telling the truth is an active and a constructive process. It's not just the words that you say is really what I'm saying. So there's power that comes out of telling the truth. Telling the truth is an active and it's a constructive process, meaning it's not something you say, it's basically what you do. Part of why I say that to you is because we're going to have a conversation about this, what my manager told me here, and you're going to hear it said from people within our company as well. And it's okay and it's good. It's a good thing to say. It's just actually not the truth. Okay. So that's why I say power comes out of telling the truth. Well, so what happened was this, is my manager said to me, okay, you want to make 100,000, the average commission check is 2,000. You're going to have to close 50 transactions in the next year in order to make $100,000. Okay, great. How do I do that? What he told me next, this is where I'm telling you, what he told me is actually not true. You're going to hear people say it, probably even John and George say it. And why we say it is because it is a good way to, okay? But here's what you're going to hear people say is the number of people that you talk to on a daily basis is actions you'll close in a year. So you're going to hear that. If you haven't heard it yet, you're going to hear that. But that's what my manager told me. If you will talk to 50 people every single day, he said, you will close 50 transactions at the end of the year. So I said, great. How do I do that? And he said, go knock on doors. So what I did is I found an agent in the office. And so one of the things that I would recommend, and I know some of you have done this already. So if you haven't done this though, I do recommend this. I found an agent in the office and said, let's prospect together. Now that didn't mean let's like share commissions. Like you can do that. I'm not recommending that. I'm also not saying you can't, but I just found an agent that I said, let's prospect together. Let's hold each other accountable. And what I mean by is think of it as like, if you were going to start working out, one of your best secrets to be successful at that is find somebody to do it with. Find somebody that's going to hold you accountable to show up to the gym And then if you don't show up, they're going to call you and go, why didn't you show up? I got up at 5 o'clock. Why didn't you? So that's what I did is I found this lady. Her name is Shirley. She's still an agent today. In fact, she owns her own brokerage. And Shirley and I just said, okay, let's meet every day and let's prospect together. So there's another bonus principle for you. In terms of your prospecting, I would recommend if you struggle doing it, get somebody to do it with that will hold you accountable to show up and prospect at the same time. Okay. All right. So I get Shirley and I said to Shirley, let's do this. So here's what Shirley and I did. Now, what I'm about to say to you, I don't recommend necessarily. I'm not necessarily against this either, but you'll see how I change it up here in just a minute. But what Shirley and I would do is Shirley and I would meet at the office basically at 9 o'clock every morning. We would go into a conference room at 9:15 and we do some role play. We would role play from 9:15 till 9. I recommend that you do that. Just, I would say probably do it earlier than that, but whatever, just do some role play. But so Shirley and I would role play 9:15 to 9:45. We would get done with role play. I would go get whatever I needed. She would get whatever she needed. We would go out to the parking lot. We would jump in either her car or my car, and we would drive to, we had a neighborhood out in Kearns that we loved to knock on the doors because at that time, the prices of those homes there were some of the cheapest in the market to where, so the neighborhood was Hoffman Heights, if you're familiar at all with it. We would go knock on Hoffman Heights because what we found is if you listed a house there, it would sell like that because they were the cheapest houses on the market. So we would go door knock on Hoffman Heights and we would knock on doors until we got 25 contacts. So what I did is I had a business card I'd carry around, and every time I talked to somebody, I would make a tick mark on there until I had gotten to 25. Back then, that usually took us 2 to 2.5 hours, somewhere between 2 hours and 2.5. So from 10 until about noon, 12:30, we would go knock on doors. Then we would drive back to the office, go our separate ways to do whatever for lunch. Then we would meet back at the office at 2 o'clock. And then she and I would jump on the phone and we would call until we got 25 more contacts. So we were doing that to get our 50 contacts every day. So about a year goes by. And after a year of that, I had been doing 50 contacts every single day because every day Shirley and I, and it didn't matter, rain, snow, whatever, we would jump in the car, we would drive out there, we would knock on those doors till we got our 25 contacts. Then we would go back to the office from 2 till 4 or 4:30. We would make phone calls till we got to our other 25. So we were getting to 50 contacts. So a year later, I've done 50 contacts every single day. And at the end of that, I had closed 17 transactions. Now, do the math on that. 2,000 times 17 is, yeah, $34,000. So I essentially had replaced my income in real estate. So so that was about a year in. So a year and a half into real estate, I'm still on track for another 17. So I'm frustrated, but I had somebody convince me to go to this training class that was offered. So this is 1997. I get convinced you should go to this training that this guy from California had flown into Utah to do this training. So I went to his training. It was a 5-day training, but the way it happened was it was a Monday, Tuesday. Then you would go 2 weeks and on a Friday. So it was a 5-day training spread out basically over the whole month is what happened. Well, I went to this training, and when I got there in the training, I brought up to the guy, I'm from, I said, I want to make $100,000 a year. I'm getting paid $2,000 a closing. I want to get 50 closings a year, but I did 17. And I said, I'm doing everything I was told to do. Like, I have always been the type of person of if you'll just tell me this is how you do it, I will go and do that. So I said, I'm frustrated because I've done everything they've told me to do. And the first thing that he told me, which is what we're going to talk about right now, is your first thing that you have to have, the first principle that in terms of you setting more appointments is focus. And so what he then said to me was this, he drew this on the board for me, actually. So we'll draw it up here for you guys to see. So he drew this here, this and this line, I probably should have done a different color here. Make it maybe a little more noticeable here. I don't know, maybe not. That didn't work so well. Anyway, let's try this black one. This one. Anyway, so this black line. What he drew up there is this, and then he separated it into 4 areas. And he said basically, this line, this black line is the learning curve. Okay, so this is anytime you're going to learn any new skill, you're going to go along this process of what that black line looks like. And he said that gets broken down into 4 different areas. The first area is what we call the activities phase, is what he told me. Now, in the activities phase, what is happening is this is where most agents, especially new agents, get stuck, is in this activities phase. Because in real estate school, did they teach you how to sell real estate?
No.
What did they teach you?
Laws and
Yeah.
cases. And
They taught you how to pass the test.
Yeah.
Like that's really what their job is to teach you how to pass the test. So because of that, the reason we have such a high failure rate in real estate is because most agents come into real estate never having been taught how to do it. And so they get stuck in this activities phase, which is, I need to learn how to fill out a contract. I need to learn the MLS. I need to learn like all the systems and tools and like, what do we have available and how do I market, blah, 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 blah. Well, if this black line also represents your income, then how much in the activities phase? Yeah, really 0, right? So then he said the next phase in this process is what we would call the contacts phase. In the contacts phase, what is happening is your focus is on making contacts. And what was my focus?
making contact.
It was to make 50 contacts every day, which is what I was doing. And what he showed me though is here's the problem. So again, if this black line represents your income, and in the contacts phase, how much money was I making? Some.
You did some. You,
Yeah,
you,
I
you
closed
re-
17
You
transactions,
replace your income. I mean,
which in today's world, if you close 17 transactions, you're making probably close to 200,000, right? If you're doing that, but so fine, but that's where it was at. Well, that's not where I wanted to be. And so what he said was this, is he said, you're stuck in this contacts phase. He said, the problem that you're having, why you're only making this, and this is why I would say to you, the idea of the number of contacts you make in a day is the number of closings you'll have in a year. The reason I struggle with that is because if all you're focused on is contacts, that's all you're going to get. That's what you end up with. So, and in fact, Jason Carlson, who's one of the other compliance brokers here, Jason one day decided, I want to make 100 contacts in one day. Now, I've never done that, but he said, I want to do that. And here's why I've never done it. To get 50 contacts in a day. Well, Joel, you do a bit of calling, right?
Yeah,
Have you ever done 50 in a day?
that's what I do almost every day.
Okay. How long does it take you to get 50 contacts?
Long time, 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, it's typically going to be 4 to 5 hours. So now imagine you decided you wanted to do 100 in a day.
Like 8 to 10 hours.
so
You're going to be 8 to 10 hours. That's
So-
why I never did it.
he'll be contacting people all the working hours. Here,
Yeah, that's right. So what he did is he said, I'm going to make 100 contacts. So he did. And it took him, I think, I need to ask him again, over 8 hours though. Took him over 8 hours of phone calling to get to 100. Guess how many appointments he said? 0.
What?
0 appointments.
in
Well,
100 calls?
in 100 contacts, not calls, contacts.
Okay.
Made 0 appointments. Now, here's why. Because he was so focused on getting the contacts. So here's what happens. When your focus is on making contacts, what happens is as soon as somebody answers the phone, or if you're knocking on a door, you knock on the door and they open the door. What happens is you then at that point say, oh, there's one. Like for me, the way that I kept track of my contacts, if I knocked on a door and somebody opened it and I said, hi, my name is Russ, I'm with Century 21. And I was wondering if you know anybody that's thinking about buying or selling. No, and leave me alone. I was like, well, there's one.
Okay.
And if you're looking for contacts, you are just successful.
You're right.
Yeah. So what he said to me, this guy, is he said, quit focusing on contacts and instead, I need you to move over to this phase. This phase here is what we call the appointments phase. So I'm going to abbreviate it to APPTS. So appointments. In the appointments phase, this is what it looks like. So when you're in the contacts phase, what you're doing is you've set an objective of doing 50 contacts every day. And then at the end of the day, so you do 50 a day, is that what you said? That's what you're doing.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, when you hit 50, how do you feel?
I feel good.
Yeah, we feel, and that's how I was. I felt great because I was like, I made 50 contacts. Like I did what I said I was going to do. But I closed only 17 transactions, which is, like I said, in today's world, that's a lot more money. But back then, like that was $34,000. That wasn't going to cut it for me. So I said, I want to get past that. Like I want to do 50 closings in a year. So this guy said, okay, here's what you're going to do then. Is now remember, I told you guys the way that this class worked when I did it was a Monday, Tuesday, then we went a whole week and then went Wednesday, Thursday. So what he said to me was this: if you really want to get to 50 closings a year, you have to change from this. Now I want to be really, really clear. I still kept track of my contacts. Like, so what I'm about to say, don't hear it that you don't have to keep track, because you still need to keep track. But what he said to me is, if you want to take your business to the next level, you're going to prospect until you set an appointment. Who cares how many contacts it takes you? You prospect until you set an appointment. That's why this is called the appointments phase. And so he said, what you're going to have to do is you don't get to go home until you set an appointment. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I think he could tell I didn't really know what I was committing to, because he said, no, like for real, like you can't go home until you set an appointment. And I said, yeah, no, I get it. And he said, okay, but let me just, forgive me, but let me just make sure that you understand what I'm telling you. He said, you're going to go home from class tonight and tell your wife, if tomorrow when I go to work, I don't set an appointment, I'm not coming home. And I was like, oh, like I really can't go home until I set an appointment. He said, yeah, that's what I mean. And I said, oh, I don't know if I want to commit to that. And he said, it's for 1 week. Like, just commit to it for 1 week, that if you don't set an appointment, you won't go home. And I was nervous. So, but I finally said, okay, I'll do it. Because he said, you can do it, I promise. So I said, okay. Now, let me ask you guys. If I said to you, for tomorrow, you cannot leave this office until you set an appointment, what time would you show up at the office tomorrow?
7.
Okay, Joe,
Early.
pretty early. Okay, what about you guys on Zoom? What time are you going to show up at the office?
Yeah, early. Probably
Yeah.
7.
That's right. So that's exactly what I did. So instead of showing up at the office at 9 like I was like, okay, I got to show up early. So I showed up at 7. I think it was 7:30, but it's between 7 and 7:30. I don't remember for sure. But so I get there at 7:30, let's say. And Shirley, the lady that I prospected with, did not go to this training. So I hadn't talked to her at all. I just showed up the next morning, 7:30. And back then, the way that we got for sale by owners, Red X didn't exist. In fact, to some extent, about that time, the company that I believe then became the Red X, what they would do, and this wasn't happening at that time, but not long after, what they started to do is they would go through the newspaper and find all of the for sale by owners, and then the office could sign up and they would fax to us, here's the list of for sale by owners for the day. That's kind of where Red X started. But for me, I had to go stop. So I would drive on the way to the office. I would stop at the gas station, 7-Eleven or whatever, buy a newspaper, get to the office. I would open up the classifieds and I would go circle all the for sale by owners. Then I would go print off the expired listings. So I would go get on the MLS and I printed off all the expireds. And then back then we had a book that was no lie like this, that called the Cold Directory. And I would go through it. It was basically a phone book, but it was put together by street rather than alphabetically. So you would go to streets in alphabetical order. So you go to the streets, find the street, then the house number, and you could a lot of times get a phone number. So that's what I did between 7:30 and 8. 8 o'clock hits and I'm on the phone. I'm calling for sale by owners. I'm calling expireds. Like I was going through everything because I had committed, like honestly, I truly believed I was not going to quit and go home until I had set an appointment. Like I knew like it was for real. It wasn't like a made up, well, I'll do my best. No, I was like, I will not go home until I set an appointment. So I get through all the for sale by owners and expireds. I didn't set an appointment. So then I was like, okay, well, now it's probably like 8:30 or something like that. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to now go through and call all of the leads that I had. So I found every lead that I had and I started calling and just calling and calling. Well, somewhere along the way of that calling on those leads, I set an appointment. So I get done with that. Shirley gets to the office about 9 o'clock. 9:15, we go in and role play, and she says, all right, let's go out and go knock on doors. And I said, oh, I forgot to tell you guys one thing. The other piece of this, when he told me prospect until you set an appointment and don't go home until you do, when he told me that, he said, the other side of that is once you set your appointment, you're done. You don't have to prospect anymore. Just be done prospecting, go home. So what he said is if you do it on your first contact and you set an appointment, you're done for the day. If it takes you 100, then that's what you're going to do. But whenever you set the appointment, you're done. And I was like, okay. So it's now 9:15. Shirley gets to the office. We go into the training room or the conference room. In the conference room, we do our role play, and Shirley says, all right, I'll meet you out in the parking lot to go door knock. And I said, oh, no, I'm actually done for the day. And the thing that was great about Shirley as an accountability partner was she would not take no for an answer. So she was like, oh, no, you're still going door knocking. And I was like, no, I can't, because I promised that once I set my appointment, I was done. And I left out one other thing too. Let me back up. The other thing he told me when I was hesitant to commit to this, the other thing he told me is he said, if you'll commit to this, if you'll commit to I prospect until I set an appointment, he said, you will prospect half as much as you have been and you'll double your income. So that was what finally got me to go, okay, I'll do it, was because he said, you will prospect half as long. So you're not going to take 50 contacts to set an appointment. You'll be able to set one faster. Okay. So now keep in mind, so I started at 8 o'clock. By 9:15, I had already set an appointment. So I'm an hour and 15 minutes into the day. I've already set my appointment. So I role played with Shirley. She said, let's go door knocking. I said, I'm not going today because I've already set an appointment. And part of my agreement was once I set my appointment, I was done prospecting for the day. So I said, I'm just going to do a few other things and go home. So I did whatever else I needed to do. It's noon. I go walking in the door and my wife's like, I thought you weren't coming home till you set an appointment today. Are you just here for lunch? And I said, no, I set my appointment. I'm done. I'm home. And my wife was like, okay. So the next day, same thing. By 10 o'clock, I had set an appointment. I go walking in the house at about noon. And my wife's like, yeah, I don't think I like this idea. Like, you were staying at work till 5 or 6, and now you're home at noon, and you think we're going to double our income? I don't know. And I said, it's just for a week. So let's just see what happens. So here's the interesting thing. And I wish I still had my notes that had all of my numbers on it, but I was doing 50 contacts every single day and not setting very many appointments. I might have set 2 a week or something like that. I don't know, 2, maybe 3. But all of a sudden, in half the amount of prospecting, I was setting appointments every single day. So a week goes by and I've set an appointment every single day, and every single day I had it set before noon. So I was all of a sudden now doing a lot better. So I go back to the training on that Wednesday and he said, how did it go? And I was like, I can't believe it. Like, I really actually set a ton of appointments. Now, why? What is the difference that had me then do that? And so part of it is the focus. So that's what we're talking about, is your focus has to be on making appointments, not on contacts. That's great. But so what? What does having the focus, what changed for me? And this is the key thing that I want you guys to understand on this first point. what changed for me in this scenario? Why was I able to set appointments in half the time?
Because you were focusing on.
Okay.
That was your focus.
Okay, good.
what you
That's-
wanted.
That was my focus. You're right on. But so what? I mean, Joel, do you not want to set an appointment every day?
They do.
Okay, so what changed then?
Instead of someone answering you, just like it's a contact, someone answered you're trying to set that appointment.
Good. Here's how I want you, here's how I'm writing it down for you guys to understand. What changed is my approach. When your focus is on setting an appointment versus making a contact, your approach changes. Your whole approach changes. Let me show you what I mean. So Luz. When my focus was on contacts, this is what it looked like. Knock, knock, knock. And don't give me an appointment, like
Okay.
do what typically people do when you're knocking on their door, okay? So I'd knock on the door, knock, knock.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Russ. I'm with Century 21. We just listed your neighbor's home down the street on Birch and Pine. It's got 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. It's listed for 600,000. Who do you know that would want to move into the area?
Right now, nobody goes to my,
Okay, have you thought about selling?
no, not really.
Okay, well, do you know anybody else thinking about selling?
No, no, no,
Okay, well, here's my card. If you'd ever hear of anybody, have them give me a call.
that's,
And then I go, "Choop, there's one. Okay, knock, knock, knock. Hello. Hey, my name's Russ. I'm with Century 21. I almost said my name's Aubrey. My name's Russ. I'm with Century 21. And I just was, we listed your neighbor's home on Birch and Pine, blah, 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 blah. Who do you know that wants to move into the area?
I don't know anybody.
Okay, well, have you thought about selling it all?
No.
Do you know anybody thinking about it?
Not really.
Okay, here's my card. If you know anybody, that's what my prospecting looked like. Now, though, now look at this, though. Well, as soon as my focus changed from I gotta get 50 contacts to I gotta do this until I set an appointment and I can't go home until I do. Now, all of a sudden, let me show you what my approach looked like. So knock knock.
hello.
So now don't be a jerk, but also like meaning if you slam the door, that's fine. I'll just move on to the next door. But
I'll be a cupcake.
yeah, don't roll over, but don't be a real jerk either. Okay, only set an appointment with me if you feel like, yeah, I would probably meet with you then. Okay, all right, so knock knock.
Hello.
Hi, my name's Russ. I'm with Century 21. We just listed your neighbor's house over on Birch and Pine. It's got 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage, and it's listed for 600,000. And I'm just curious who you know that would want to move into the area.
Honestly, nobody comes to mind right now.
Okay, well, I appreciate you thinking about it. So what about you? Have you thought about selling your home at all?
Well, no, not really.
No, I haven't. Okay, well, do you know anybody else maybe thinking about it?
No, not really.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
just giving you the answers that they give me.
Sure, that's
all the
great.
time.
So let me just ask you real quick while I've got you. How long have you lived in this house, by the way?
Oh. All my married life.
Oh, all your married life, really? So how long is that?
We've been here for 28
28 years.
years.
Wow, that's great. Where did you move from?
We were renting in Holiday and then we moved where we are.
From Holiday to here. Okay, so that's great. So what brought you here?
Well, we wanted to own a house.
Oh, just wanted to get a house. That's great. Well, good for you. Well, let me just ask you while I've got you, with us having that home listed for sale, what are the things that you just love about the neighborhood?
Oh, I love that it's peaceful. I feel safe.
Peaceful and safe is how, okay, great. Well, so if there were some things you could change though, what would be the things you might want to change?
Well, I will move from the corner to maybe the middle of the street because I don't like
Oh,
shoveling this now.
yeah,
and cleaning that corner.
I live on a corner lot. I totally understand where you're coming from. I get that. So, well, that's great. Well, let me just ask you real quick. How are you using real estate to plan for your financial future?
I never heard of that way.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So basically what I'm asking is, in terms of like investment properties, have you ever considered owning an investment property?
Not really.
Okay, well, so if there was a way you could get like what I like to call mailbox money, where money just shows up in your mailbox every month, is that something you would be interested in? I mean, would you be against getting money just show up to you?
No, it's just it's kind of far-fetched. How is that going to happen?
Well, that's the very reason that you and I should get together is because I specialize in helping people find properties that can generate some passive income from them. So if there was a way you could own an investment property, would you be against that?
No, it just sounds scary.
Scary. Yeah, no, and that's just it. That's why, it might not be right for you. It really might not be. But you know what we ought to do is sit down and spend 20-30 minutes where what I'll do is just walk you through the process. And then if it's something you're interested in, great, we'll pursue it. And if not, then, you'll at least go away with a little bit more information about how investment properties work. So what works better for you, afternoon or evenings?
The afternoon, if you promise that you won't push me, and if I can make a decision that I'm listening, but not have to do it.
Yeah, I totally understand. What was your name?
Luz?
Luz. So Luz, the good news for you is I work with my clients at their pace. So I'm not going to push you to do something you don't want to do. If I'm just going to give you the information, and if it looks like something you're interested in, we'll pursue it. And if not, you'll have some other information. So you said afternoons work better. Would 3 or 4 be better for you tomorrow? 4 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, great. All right, so I'm done prospecting for the day. Thanks, guys. See you later. All right, so now let's go back on this for a minute. So what changed? My approach changed, but what? What did I change in my approach?
You were asking more questions.
Okay, good. So that's one of the things. Ask more questions. What else?
You're more engaged.
Okay,
You wanted to know, like we asked her about how long you've been here. What are you looking for? What do you like about your house? What do you like your neighborhood? So it's kind of like more about them instead of just, do you know anybody that can help me out? It's more about her.
yeah, good. Awesome.
So one thing I noticed when I went prospecting is that there was a lady and she had a house that was paid for. And I tried that approach, say, hey, have you considered investment property? And she cut me really off, but like, you know what? I'm very busy right now. I don't have time for this. So thank you. I don't know what I did wrong, or maybe it was just the way she was.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're not gonna set an appointment on every contact.
Yeah.
Like, so part of it is just recognize that what you're looking for is though the ones that do have something maybe going on inside that could work. So there are a few other questions and things that a lot of times that I'll ask that I typically would ask first that I didn't ask you. To some extent, I kind of just let it flow based on where the conversation was going.
Okay.
But yeah, you may have people who say, no, I'm not interested. And if you had said that, I would have said, great, well, I appreciate your time. If you ever have a real estate need, here's my card, see you later. Then I would have gone to Aubrey and, hey, my name's Russ, I'm with Century 21, just done the same thing. But so here's the key thing though, is we're going to go through, because the other 3 pieces that I want to talk about with you, I incorporated in that as well. But the first thing that I just want to make sure you guys understand is in your prospecting, your approach has to be on setting an appointment. If the problem with at least me, I can't speak for you, but for me, when I was doing 50 contacts a day, it was how fast could I get to 50 so I could be done with this? Versus when I changed it to I'm prospecting until I set, and for me, actually, let me give you this. I had to set 1 new appointment. So for me, it was I had to set 1 new appointment. Now make sure you notice that I'm saying set 1 new appointment. I didn't have to keep an appointment initially. In fact, just kind of as an FYI, that's the next phase of this, is that you actually keep 1 new appointment every day. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're just going to focus on this right here. Because for most people, this is where we need to get to first, then we can worry about this. But the objective for me was I had to set 1 new appointment. Somebody I had never met with before was what I had to do. Now, let me kind of give you a couple of other things on this, and then we'll go on to number 2 principle. But the first thing is your approach. You've got to have an approach that is, if I could see, like for me, part of what I hope you noticed the first time was how fast could I get from you to the next door, versus this time, if I can engage with you and get some conversation going, then that's great, because of what the number 2 thing that we want to talk about is is the next thing that has to happen in order for you to set appointments is you gotta connect, or you can think of it as build rapport. Okay, you gotta connect, or we gotta build some rapport with the people. So my first thing is, my approach had to change to quit being so like fast to move on to the next contact, and instead slow down and try to build a connection and create some rapport with the people. Okay, now go ahead.
So what you're trying to say, Ross, is when we change our approach, then we won't be so like, okay, next door, because I have to do 50 contacts.
That's right, because to me, and this was the key of it, is I was gonna prospect until I set an appointment, so the contacts didn't really matter. Now, like I said, I still kept track of them. But it didn't matter, because if I could set an appointment with the first door I knocked on or the first phone call I made, that was great. That's what I really wanted. And once I did that, then I didn't really care because I was setting more appointments. Now, now remember what he told me, and what I'm telling you too, is if you will commit, but you got to be committed to the point of I won't stop until I get the appointment. You will prospect half as long and double your income. So you notice the steepest part of this learning curve is in this appointments phase. That is the steepest part. Well, the reason it's the steepest part is because we have to do these other pieces that we're going to talk about. So that's the connect and rapport. So how did I build the rapport and connection with Luz?
You start asking how long I lived in the neighborhood.
That's right.
If I ever thought about owning an investment property. And I was trying to sound like a person could sound, kind of some of them.
Yeah,
like,
you were doing what you
What are
typically
you
hear.
talking about?
Yeah.
What investment?
Okay, good. So what the first thing you have to do is you got to ask them a question, which that's great. Like I think everybody does that in any prospecting. But the key thing is though, is that ask them a question, and then after they respond, and this is where I see agents drop the ball, is you've got to repeat and affirm. You've got to repeat back what they said and affirm it. Now, here's what I mean by that. On this repeat and affirm, people like people who are like them. So people like people who are like them or who they want to be. So if people like people who are like them, on this repeat and affirm, what I need to do is, so when I said to you, do you know anybody that wants to move into the area? What did you say?
Really, I don't know anybody.
So she said, really, I don't know anybody. So then what I did is repeated back exactly what she said. Oh, you don't really know anybody? Now, by saying you don't really know anybody, I'm letting her know I heard her, and then I'm going to acknowledge it by saying that's great. Or the other thing that you want to keep in mind on this, now I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't use this skill right here in that scenario, but just so that you know, is if somebody says something, and if you're repeating and affirming, and they say something that is maybe counter to what you are wanting, then you might want to say the affirmation might be, really? So what am I communicating to her if I say, really?
Did you notice what the concern or whatever?
Well,
was?
and it's almost like I'm shocked that you don't know anybody. Now, like I said, in this scenario, I wouldn't want to do that because I'm still trying to create a connection and rapport. And if I did that, that is going to break.
I say, okay.
Yeah, she's going to be like, yeah, you jerk, and shut the door, right? So instead, I'm going to go, hey, so you don't really know anybody?
No, nobody. goes.
Okay, well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to think about it. That's going to be my affirmation to them, is I'm affirming. Hey, well, I appreciate you taking the time to think about it. Let me ask you. And then the secret is, once you repeat and affirm, you've got to immediately go then back to another question. So I said, so I'm curious, who do you know that wants to move into the area? She said, nobody. I said, or nobody, I can't really think of anybody. Oh, you can't think of anybody? Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to think about it. Let me ask you, how long have you lived in this area? Or whatever. I think I said something different. I think I said, so what about you? Have you thought about buying or selling your home? No. Okay, well, and if I were you, which that leads to the next one, the piece of this on getting the connection and rapport. The other thing that we want to use is empathy. So she said, I said, have you ever thought about selling your home? No. I might want to use empathy by saying, oh, you ever thought about it? If I were you, I probably wouldn't think about it either. You've got such a beautiful home.
Now, if you knock the door again, I will give you, I found a gentleman that he says, I don't want to move because this house is all we can afford. I mean, he was comfortable financially. He says, I don't want to move. But he said then, but my wife will like to move. There is some things in this house that she doesn't like, but I'm the one that doesn't want to move. I like it. The payment is good. So, and I didn't know how to approach. He's the head of the house. He's comfortable financially, obviously. He doesn't want to mess up that good spot, but his wife is the one that will like a different.
So in that scenario, probably what I would have done with him is I probably would have said, yeah, this is like, you love the house and you're comfortable. That's great. Hey, and then I'm going to say, if I were you, so the empathy is, if I were you, you're going to say, if I were you, I would feel the exact same way. Because remember, people like people who are like them. So I want him to feel like I'm like him by saying, if I were you, I'd feel the same way. Now, let me make sure you guys understand on that. When I say, if I were you, I would feel the same way. Am I lying? Is that a lie?
Well, it depends on you, because if you really will feel like that, well, then you're not.
Well, and I think that's what you're going to say, Aubrey. So go ahead.
No, if you were, if you were in that situation, like if you were that person, you'd feel the same way. But
That's right. If I was that person, because that's what I'm saying is, if I were you, I would feel the same way. And if you were them, would you feel the same way?
if you were them,
Yeah.
Yeah, if you were them, because if you had had all the same life experiences they've had, or whatever has led them to that point, if that's where you had been, you would feel like that. So you're not lying by saying, if I were you, I would feel the exact same way. So now remember, people like people who are like them. So the more I can say, well, hey, if I were you, sir, I would feel the exact same way. So what is it that you just love about the neighborhood? So I'm going to give them an opportunity like I did to you. Tell me what you love about the area. And then they're going to tell me, and I'm going to repeat and affirm back. Oh, you love the park being close by. You love the whatever. Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, that's exciting. Well, what about for you? If there were some things you would change in your home, what would you change? Is what I would have done with him. So he told you there were things that his wife would change.
Yes.
I would now be saying, well, what about you? If there were some things you would change. Now, on Thursday in class, I'm going to dive into deeper detail of why you would want to say this. The reason why you want to ask people of, well, are there some things you don't like about it? Is because of what we'll talk about it on Thursday, but it's called percolation. Is what you're trying to do is kind of plant a seed that they may percolate on, that has them then start thinking about, well, yeah, what are the things? And I'll tell you more about that on Thursday. But I got to repeat and affirm and use empathy to create this connection and rapport. I like to think about this as I'm earning the right to stay on the phone or on their doorstep talking to them. This is the way I'm going to earn the right to do that. Is people like people who are like them. So you want to ask the question when they respond. So the other one that I like to use is, so how long have you lived at this address?
27 years.
27 years? Really? That's great. What brought you here? Now, I want to talk about for a minute how I did that for a second, because UCLA did a study on communication. And here's what they found is 7% of communication is the words that we use. Okay, 7% of their communication is the words we use. 38% of our communication is the tone or the inflection. And 55% of communication is the body language. Okay, so 55% of communication is body language. So now I'm going to give you a few examples of this real quick. But in terms of the words that we use, if I walked in the house tonight when I got home and just saw my wife and I was like, oh, hey, honey, I hate you. Is that going to go over very well? So part of why I say that is, even though I'm saying words are only 7%, the words are still important. Because if I walked into the house and said, oh, hey, honey, I hate you, like that's not going to go over real well, even though I might have said it in a great way. So the words are still important. I want to make sure you understand that. But more important than the words is the tone. Because what if I use the right words and I walked in the house tonight and I said, oh, hey, honey, I love you. I used the right words.
Yeah, but
But
that doesn't.
What's the message that got conveyed to her?
You're not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I do. That's right. So notice that the way that we use these words based on the tone that we use, and let me just give you another example of that. So I'm gonna say a statement, and then you guys tell me what I'm implying from that statement. Okay. I didn't say he stole the money.
Say it. You didn't say it.
Yeah, somebody did, but it wasn't me, right? Okay. How about I'm gonna say the same thing again. I didn't say he stole the money.
You didn't say it. The words that come out of your mouth.
Okay. I didn't say he stole the money.
Somebody else.
Okay. I didn't say he stole the money.
If it's not stole, like you can steal it, but it's okay.
I didn't say he stole the money.
Now I'm lost.
The money.
Yeah, he might have stolen something, but it wasn't the money, right? Notice how based on the emphasis of the word totally changes the meaning. I didn't say he stole the money, or I didn't say he stole the money. I didn't say he stole the money. Notice it totally changes what I'm saying based on this tone. So now watch. So let me come back again, because this is how I always do this. And I have found this is the one that tends to, for me at least, create this connection and rapport.
So,
Is when, go ahead.
sorry, I'm curious. If what we say is just 7% words and there is a lot on it, more weight on the tone and on my body language, then that makes sense that sometimes in the role play, we focus a lot more on the how am I saying what I'm saying
Yes.
and my body language.
Yes,
Because sometimes I feel like we're focusing on the 7%.
correct.
But then there is a huge percent that I might be just.
Yeah,
bumping.
you might, yeah, a lot of times in the role play, people work on well, I gotta get a good script.
Yes.
And yes, like I said, the words are important.
But
You can't walk in the house and say to my wife, I hate you. Like, I can't say that. I gotta have the right words, but how I use them is way more important. And then when you add the body language to it. So let me show you what I mean. So for me, and by the way, when you're on the phone, you get rid of this, sort of. Meaning on the phone, they can't see your body language. The phone tends to dilute the body, what would come, it dilutes your communication because they can't see the body language. See, it's no different. Let me even say it this way. Let me back up for a minute. Same thing with sending a text message to people. When you just text them words, it can be interpreted way different, which thank goodness for emojis, because we can somewhat show
Yeah.
what the tone is by the emoji that we
That's-
throw on with it. But without that, think about how many times you've read a text message and that you're either mad or whatever, and maybe the person didn't mean it that way. It's just you only got the words. See, that's how powerful our communication is so because if you're on the phone, the body language doesn't come through, you actually have to overdo it, overbake it in terms of body language if you're on the phone. If you're on the phone prospecting, you've got to really get the body language going. Meaning, so let me show you what I mean. I'll show you how I'm gonna do the same thing 2 different ways. One, like I'm in person with you, one like I'm on the phone with you. Okay, so knock, knock.
Hello,
Hi, my name's Russ, blah, 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 blah. Who do you know that wants to move into the area? Nobody, great. I appreciate you thinking about it. But what about you? Have you thought about buying or selling? No, okay. How long have you lived at this home?
28 years.
28 years? Are you kidding? That's great. Where did you move from? So now,
Renting.
pause for a minute there. Did you guys catch, what did I do with my body language on that?
You were like, engaged,
What did that do for you?
you are paying attention, you are putting yourself in my shoes.
Okay, good. So notice, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think I started actually doing this, like when you told me last time, good, like when you emphasize it more. It can, from what I see, I kind of like know people, they get almost kind of like pride.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have, I'm like, I've been here for 5 years, and they kind of smile a little bit
Yep.
more. They get more excited, I guess.
That's
More
right.
excited, so.
And what that tells me is when they do that, I've got the connection and rapport, which is what I'm trying to get.
Yeah,
So if I'm on the phone now, so where we can't see body language, and I were to call, so ring, and Luz answers the phone, and I blah, blah, blah. So how long have you lived at this address?
28 years.
28 years? You're kidding, that's great. So because she can't see my body language, you gotta overdo it when you're on the phone, because it's gonna get watered down, because all they're hearing is the tone. It's the body language that they're looking at. So now, a book that you can read about this, I actually didn't enjoy the book, FYI, but it's good information, is called What Everybody Is Saying. So it's like what everybody is saying, but it's what everybody is saying. This guy that wrote the book, and I can't even think of his name right now, but he was like a interrogator or something. And basically what he talks about is how just slight little facial expressions can totally, what?
Chris Voss.
No, it's not Chris Voss, because Chris Voss is good too. But yeah, but this guy, it's What Everybody Is Saying is the name of the book. I could probably try to look it up unless somebody already knows. I've got it. Well, I've got the book, I think, in here.
How come you didn't like it? No?
I don't know. I just didn't enjoy reading it, but it was good information.
Marvin Carlins. Like Joe Navarro.
Joe Navarro, that's who it is. It's Joe Navarro. Yep. What everybody is saying. Anyway. The whole idea of that is just slight facial expressions is what we do. So let me actually give you a quick example of this that he talks about in the book. Part of what you want to pay attention to, if you're at a social gathering and you're talking to somebody, so if Aubrey and I were standing here talking, pay attention to their feet. When you're there talking to somebody, pay attention to their feet, because if their feet are pointed at you, they're engaged, they're interested. But if you start to see their feet be off-centered a little bit, that's their way of telling you, I'm done with this conversation. So that's the kind of stuff from the book that's,
Is that it?
yep, that's it.
Or
Yep.
they slam the door. That's it too.
So
If what?
They slam the door too. then-
Yeah, if they slam the door too, but even just like at the office, though, pay attention of. I had one time that I watched I was in somebody's office and I watched an agent come to talk to that person. And they like, assuming this is the door here. Going over here, so if you want to zoom, you can see that. So like, assume this is like, not the door, but the doorway, like this is the doorway, I guess. Like they came to the door and they had just their head in like, hey, I got a quick question for you. Like, if somebody does that, what their body is telling you by being like this is, I don't want a whole bunch of detail, just give me the answer kind of a thing. But the fascinating thing was that then the person whose office I was in said something that the agent who was here like this was interested in. They came right into the doorway and they were like, oh, okay. And then as soon as they got the information, they were like, all right, well, hey, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like, so pay attention to the body language, but more important is for you as you're prospecting is what is your body language communicating? And just like what Aubrey said, especially if you're out knocking on doors, oh, you're kidding. That's great. 5 years? Really? And I don't care what they say. If they said 2 months, I'm gonna go, 2 months? You're kidding. If they said 50 years, 50 years, 1 year, 1 year, that's great. Like whatever it is they say, I don't care. You're kidding. That's great. And when you do that, they get exactly what it's almost like, yeah, I have been here that long, but what I've noticed is that seems to be when I can tell I've got the connection and rapport, which then leads to the next thing that we have to do on every call, and that is create value. Or think of it as you have to make them curious. So another book for you, if you haven't read it, is The Secrets of Question-Based Selling. Thomas Fries is the author.
Secret of questions.
The secret of question-based selling, and Thomas Fries, but it's with an S, not a Z. But you've got to create value for the people. So once you have created some connection and rapport, then the next thing you've got to do is create value, or Thomas Fries says it is you got to make them curious. If you can make them curious or they can see the value, they'll meet with you. So one of the ones that I liked to use for me all the time with door knocking is if I would ask, have you had a chance to sit down and talk to anybody about what's going on in the market today? I love using that one as a way of getting an appointment with either a buyer or a seller. Have you had a chance to sit down and talk to anybody about what's going on in the market today? And then from there, they usually were going to say no. And I would say, you know what I specialize in doing is spending 15-20 minutes with people just to give them an update, because what you see on the news is not actually what's going on in the market today. So I'm going to use that. Or you may use other things that are just going to create some value. So for example, if I'm on the phone calling and talking to a potential buyer, I might say to them, and now keep in mind, like what I'm about to say is everybody really still has this, but one of the things I like to use is to say, I'm a member of the National Association of Realtors. And what that means is I have access to properties that agents that are not don't have access to. Well, most of the public doesn't really know that almost every agent out there is a member of the National Association of Realtors, but not every agent is. And so therefore they don't have, the ones who aren't don't have access to our MLS. But what I'm trying to do is create some value or make them curious. So part of where this comes from, by the way, is this. On like an internet website, when somebody goes on and signs up on an internet website, did you know that they sign up on typically at least 4 other websites besides the one, they don't go just sign up on one. They will go to 5 typically websites and sign up. Why? Why would they do that? Why would somebody sign up on multiple websites?
The best I guess offer maybe, or not best offer, but best like.
They think we have access to different properties. So by signing up on 5 different websites, they think what's going to happen is they're going to see different properties on each of those websites. When in actuality, all those websites are just an IDX feed of the MLS. They're all the same properties. So part of why I say that we want to use that with a buyer as a way of creating value for people and to make them curious is because by me saying I have access to every property that goes on the market through every other agent that's part of the National Association of Realtors, is you're going to have access, in their mind, they're thinking you're going to have access to more properties than other agents that are out there. Does that make sense? So I'm telling them the truth, like, hey, I've got access to every property that anybody puts on to the multiple listing service. So you can even just say it that way. I am a member of the multiple listing service, which gives me access to tons, look at however many properties there are and just, whatever. But I have access to 7,000 properties, whatever it is that's on the MLS for the state of Utah right now. I've got access to over 7,000 properties. Like what you're doing is trying to have them feel like there's value, or you got to make them curious about something. Okay. So one of the other things that I'll use for a buyer is I have access to properties before they hit the market. So I like using that as a way of creating value or making people curious, is I've got access to properties before they hit the market. Now, how do I have access to properties before they hit the market?
The agents here.
That's right. You guys are part of the #1 office in the Century 21 system. We have a ton of properties that we're going to have as interaction with other agents throughout the office that, hey, so-and-so is going to be listing this property and you hear them talking about it. You got access to properties before they hit the market.
yesterday I went to a client. And on my way out, I saw a house listed in that neighborhood that I was interested. So I took a picture, and then when I came here, I was looking and I'm thinking, it's weird. I can't find it. So I called the agent and she said, oh, it's coming in the market on Tuesday. And I'm thinking, okay.
Yeah, so that's just it. We have access to properties. Okay, so what about with the seller then? How can I create value for a seller? Well, one of the things that I would now, what I'm about to say to you, I want to make sure you understand that you're probably not going to actually do this. Like in actuality, what I'm going to share with you is possible. You can do it. It's unlikely that it's going to happen. But part of what I'm doing is I want to create value. I want the person with a seller to see the value in setting up an appointment with me. So you're doing for sale by owners and expireds, right? Or
Yeah,
and is that mostly what you're doing?
I do a little bit of everything.
Okay.
In the morning.
What are you prospecting?
I'm doing starting to expires.
Okay.
Door knocking, and SOI.
Okay, what are you doing, Luz?
Expires.
Expireds? Okay, good. So what about you guys on Zoom? Either throw it in the chat box or unmute. Tell me what you're prospecting for. What sources? SOI. Okay, cool. Thanks, Becky. Nobody else is prospecting, so okay. I'm just kidding. Okay, so here's the thing. So this is not always going to, you're not going to actually always do this, but this is a great way for them to see value in you. Is in today's market, are we back to a scenario where with a seller, buyers are potentially, or more often now than what we were the last 2 years, coming in and asking the buyer to pay, or the seller to pay their closing costs?
Yes.
Okay, so what you would want to do then on this is if I'm working it for sale by owner and expired, since that's what most of you guys are talking about there, is I'm going to say something along the lines of, well, so Joel, I understand you're trying to do your home for sale by owner. And again, I'm going to, hey, if I were you, I'd feel the exact same way. So let me ask you though, how are you using point leveraging as a way of netting more money? That's what they're going to say to you. What? And then I'm going to say, oh, yeah. So have you not considered using that?
No.
Oh, you know what we ought to do is we ought to sit down and spend 20, 30 minutes so I can walk you through the process. What works better for you, afternoon or evenings?
Evenings.
Okay. See, now notice if you can create value or have them be curious of like, what are you talking about? Then that's going to now create the scenario where I can then ask for and set the appointment. So now what is point leveraging? So I'm going to give you a quick overview on this. And like I said, you're probably not going to do it, but it still is a strategy that could and sometimes does get used. Okay. But what's the current interest rate today in ballpark? Six-ish?
It's a 675 if it's accurate.
Oh, yeah, if this is accurate, this is a conventional 5.99, but let's just say 6% then, okay? Let's say the interest rate 6%. Buyer comes in and asks the seller to pay 3% of their towards their closing costs. Okay. So instead, so this is how you would go in on your appointment with the seller to show them how you would do this, is when a buyer comes in and asks to pay that, we're going to go back and talk to the lender, and you're probably gonna have to talk to the lender because the buyer's agent isn't going to understand it. But essentially, you're going to go and say, instead of that, have the lender do your interest rate at 6.5%. At 6.5%, that mortgage company is going to get paid extra on that loan. So they're charging a premium on the interest rate. So instead of the seller paying the buyer's closing costs, the lender charges a higher interest rate, and then the lender pays their closing costs. Now, a lender potentially might say, well, I don't want to do that because what's going to happen to the buyer's payment now?
Going to be higher.
It's going to be higher. But if you say this to a loan officer, they will now then get on your side and they'll go to their client and say, I think we ought to do this. Because what you can say to the lender is, yeah, that it will be higher, but how long after they close could you do a refinance? and refinance them down to 6%. Or let's say interest rates go down to 5.5%. Now you just refinance them down to 5.5%.
Yeah.
How long are you gonna have to wait to do that? And now all of a sudden the loan officer goes, oh, wait, so I'll get paid on doing the loan here and then I'm gonna refinance it and get paid again? Yeah, that's a great idea. Let me talk to my client. Now, like I said, I want to be really, really clear that a lot of times it's not gonna work. But this is a strategy though, for you to create value, to have the client that this for sale by owner or this expired feel like, well, maybe this person does know something that could help me net more money. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's what this point leveraging, that's the strategy for it. But I'm also very clear that most of the time a buyer is not going to go for it. But it's at least a way I can show my value to set an appointment. Go ahead.
This is this is a thought. Would it be, I mean, I don't know if anybody else would like this. I think it'd be cool to have a class on just creating value.
That's what I was telling Ruby the other day. Exactly that.
I mean, I try to do like little things, thinking outside the box. I know you're supposed to like do that at age, but it'd be cool just to kind
Just to
of.
do it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or just get awesome experience.
From other agents and stuff. Yeah.
just to see, you know,
In fact,
Yeah, cause
that is a really good idea. I'll talk to Ruby and say, let's get a base camp that we do that to have,
in fact, it
Let's-
wasn't,
yeah,
it
it's a
wasn't
good
Ruby.
idea.
I think I told that to John Syed.
was it to John?
Yeah, because I said, we talk so much about the value, and I said, okay, now.
How do I do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's a great idea. I love it. All right. So that's the next thing that's got to happen on your prospecting is you've got to create some value and make them curious. Okay. And then once you have done that, now we can do number 4, which is close. Now, there are only 5 ways in the English language that you can close. Okay. And here's what they are: is what time, which time, how soon, when, and where. Those are the only 5 ways in the English language that you can ask for an appointment. If you say anything else, you're not asking for an appointment. If you say, is there a time we could get together? You're not asking for an appointment. If you say, would you like to get together? You're not asking for an appointment. If I said to somebody, is there a time we can get together? What am I really asking? Like if you were to really analyze that question, is there a time we can get together? What is it really asking?
Tell you no, there's not time.
No.
I think the teacher, can you? Like, yeah. can
That's
you?
right.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're asking, is it possible? When you say, is there a time we can get together? You're asking about possibilities. So now you guys answer for me. Is it possible for them to get together with you?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's
well,
possible.
Provided they see the value. So now here's the key thing I want to make sure that you guys understand. If you have created enough value in your prospecting, you could say, is there a time we can get together? And they're going to say yes, because they see the value. But if you haven't quite created enough value, maybe you've got some value, but not to the point that they're ready to say yes. And you say, is there a time we can get together? They're going to, no, I'm pretty busy. They're going to say no that way. So now let me give you a quick story on this. And in fact, I see Trent Hyde's online. So you might know this agent, Trent. When we were at Coldwell Banker, she was up in Ogden. But I was teaching this class one day, and this agent came to the class, and I was having this conversation where I said, can we get together is not asking for an appointment. And this agent said, she raised her hand and she goes, I say, can we get together? And I get tons of appointments. Actually, let me rephrase that. She didn't say I get tons. She said, I do a lot of business. And I just said, okay, great. So here's the thing. Part of what I want you guys to understand on this, especially when we're talking about the words and stuff, is if what you're doing is working, you don't have to change anything. Don't change anything. But if what you're doing is not getting you the results you want, we have to change the approach. And the first place to do that is in our language. The first place to approach changing things is in our language. So I just said, if it's working for you, if you're saying, can we get together and you're getting the appointments you want, doing the business you want, there is nothing to change. Don't change. Keep doing it. And then I went on and keep teaching the class. Well, as soon as the class got over, I went to the MLS and I was like, I wonder how much business she does. So I looked up in the last year, how many closings she had had. Any guesses how many closings she had in the last year?
So. Two.
Two. And I was like, wow, it must be working great for you. So if you want 2 closings a year, say, can we get together? If you want more than that, then you want to say what time, which time, how soon, when, or where. Now, let me give you one other one real quick that people use all the time that sabotages themselves. Watch this. Luz, why don't you give me some money?
Because I don't have any.
Okay. Aubrey, why don't you give me some money?
I don't want to.
Okay. Joel, why don't you give me some money?
Same thing, because I want.
Okay. Somebody on Zoom, unmute. Why don't you give me some money?
So you can't have my money.
Thanks, Trent.
Yeah, you
Okay.
bet.
So how much money did I just get?
None,
Zero.
Why?
because of different reasons, because you are asking why don't.
Notice that. Guess what's going to happen if you say to somebody, why don't we get together and talk more about you selling your house?
Because you are saying don't.
They're going to,
already.
yeah, you ask the question of why don't we get together? When you say, why don't we get together? They're going to tell you the reason you're not going to get together. Say, just like you guys did, I don't want to give you any money. That's why I'm not giving you. Okay, well, good. So if you want to change it, do this. Now, one other piece that I would recommend to start to do, and this does come from Chris Voss. From Chris Voss, which that book's awesome. Never Split the Difference. If you've never read that one, read that, Chris Voss. But one of the things he talks about in, and I think he does in Never Split the Difference, but is people like to say no. We all feel comfortable saying no. We're hesitant to say yes. We feel vulnerable when we say yes, but we feel safe when we say no. So ask people a question in such a way that the no is an affirmative. It means yes. So what I did with Luz when I was role playing that was 2 different times I said to her, would you be against money just showing up in your mailbox?
No.
See, now notice, if I said it the other way, if I said it as, would you like to have money show up in your mailbox every month? She might say yes, but inside she's gonna be like, that's not possible. But notice when I said, would you be against money just showing up in your mailbox? Well, no. Okay, well then what we ought to do is get together and spend 15 or 20 minutes. What works better, afternoons or evenings? So some of the stuff I would say to incorporate is ask people, would you be against? And then us getting together and spending a few minutes. Would you be offended if I provided you with information that would save you a ton of money? So ask people, would you be against? Would you be offended? Or would it be a horrible idea? And then one other piece that I want to give to you guys too, real quick. In terms of that is along this same line of getting people to say no. When you have a lead who is all of a sudden started ghosting you, I mean, does that happen to anybody else besides me?
Oh, yeah.
I thought Aubrey was gonna be like, no, they never do that. Do you guys on Zoom ever have somebody ghost you like, yeah, we're interested, and then you can never get a hold of them again? Another thing to do that is along the same lines is ask people, and you can do this via text or an email, or even works better text or an email, but you could do it voicemail as well. Have you given up on, and then whatever, either buying a home or selling your. So have you given up on selling your home? See, if you say, what have we all been trained culturally of like, have you given up on your diet? What do you feel like when somebody says, have you given up on your diet?
Yeah, let's go pounds.
Well, you're almost going to feel a little bit like we're not quitters. Like nobody wants to be perceived as a quitter. So have you given up on buying a home, or have you given up on selling? If they're ghosting you and you say that, you got a pretty good chance they're going to reply. Hey, I just wanted to check to see if you've given up on selling your house, or I wanted to see if you've given up on buying a home.
I'm gonna try right now.
Do you have one you could do it with?
Yeah.
A text? Sweet. Okay, we're going to get a live one right now. And then we'll let you guys on Zoom know what happens, see if they respond back. Just wanted to check, see if you've given up on buying a home. And then either they're gonna say, yes, we have, and they'll typically tell you why, or they're gonna go, no, sorry, we've just been really busy, and like, it'll typically get a response. If you don't get a response to that, you're not gonna get a response to anything.
They gave up.
Yeah, they gave up. And that's what you can send the next one. Sorry, you've given up. No, don't. All right. Thoughts, questions, comments?
So that book that you mentioned, Secrets of
Question-based
Question-based
Selling.
Selling, will be a good one to create the value that.
So, yeah,
What-
good question. So on the Secrets of Question-Based Selling, that book, there's a whole chapter, which the book itself is, I don't remember how many pages. It's a pretty thick book, like more than, like most books are 300 pages. This one, I don't remember, it might be 450 or something, but there's that book, The Secrets of Question-Based Selling, is not a real estate. It's just sales in general.
Okay,
But there's the chapter that he does on, he calls it Making People Curious. I don't remember the name of the chapter, but in that chapter, he does talk specifically about a real estate agent and how they did. So I'll give you another quick example though on that what he used from the book is, so if you're, Joel, calling a for sale by owner or even an expired and they are not answering for whatever reason, if you left them a message that said, I maybe not holding, but pull it up on the computer on the MLS, I've got your tax records pulled up and I've got some questions for you, give me a call back. Like, they're gonna be curious why you have their tax records pulled up, and they'll call you back. So that's one of the examples he uses in there, is you could do stuff like that, is, hey, I've got your tax records pulled up, I've got some questions for you, give me a call back. They'll call you back. Because they're gonna be like, why do you have my tax records pulled up? They don't realize that it's just public record, we could just go get it, but then you're just gonna ask them, hey, it says your square footage is this, I just wanted to verify that really is your square footage. Yeah, and then you can go bam, right into asking a question, repeat and affirm, create some value, and then close. So, yeah, good question.
so what's the author again?
Thomas Freeze,
Thomas.
but with an S, not a Z.
Okay,
And then, so on Thursday, what we're gonna do is we're gonna build on this, basically. The next thing we're gonna talk about on Thursday, same time at 11, is I'm gonna go through and talk about the buyer and the seller cycle. And I'm gonna go through and explain the percolation, information gathering, and active to help you understand basically why. One of the things that I said today in one of the role plays is, hey, good news is I work with my clients at their pace. I'm gonna show you why we wanna say that. If you're not saying that in your prospecting a lot, like seriously, almost every phone call you're ever on, unless it's easy, you create the connection and get the value really quick. If there's resistance and you're not saying, I work with my clients at their pace, you need to add that in. It drops the barrier that people have up. Because even what you said to me before, Luz, I'll meet with you, but you better not come in here and try to push me.
yeah, true.
By me saying, hey, I work with my clients at their pace, I'm not going to get you to do something you don't want to do. I just want to provide information. They drops the guard and to where they're more willing to talk to you.
Yeah, because I perceive that sometimes people think because you are an agent, that you want like, bam,
Yeah.
we're doing this now.
Oh, yeah.
And.
Well,
they're-
that's because they've had that experience with salespeople in general. In fact, actually, it helped me remember, I will start the class on Thursday showing you guys why people are afraid of being sold. So remind me on Thursday, I'll show you that, because people like to buy, nobody wants to be sold, and I'll show you why. I'll prove it to you. So. Okay, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Was there a fifth one, you said?
Oh, the bonus fifth one was power comes out of telling the
Oh,
truth.
okay.
That was the power.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. All right. Okay, well, thanks for being here. Thursday, we'll do part 2 of this, but
Thank you.
you're welcome. I'm just glad I got a wimpy clap.
I know, I didn't want to.
No,